The largest COVID-19 wave in 2 years has disrupted China's growth normalization after a strong start in early 2022. The revision to real GDP largely reflects the economic damage caused by Omicron outbreaks and the prolonged lockdowns in parts of China from March to May. However, growth momentum is expected to rise again in the second half of 2022, aided by aggressive policy stimulus to counteract the economic downturn. So why is the economy facing a downfall? Watch this video to know the entire situation happening in China. And if you enjoy such content, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell icon to never miss another upload of ours. Here we begin. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese people sent angry messages to developers, banks, and local governments this summer, which echoed in Beijing's halls of power. "You stop construction, I stop paying my mortgage," reads one letter sent on behalf of 7,200 Chongqing residents who purchased the property in the same development. "You give me the apartment and I start paying." Across 328 property developments in nearly 100 cities, similar threats have been made, and in some cases, carried out. Some messages were briefly available on Chinese social media platforms before being removed by censors. What has prompted so many people to take the streets? The short answer is that construction in apartment complexes across the country has stalled. Apartments that have devoured many people's life savings. However, the long answer traces back to long-standing issues in China's real estate sector, which have been exposed in recent years. Roots of the crisis: deflating the bubble. China's property boom has been a major driver of the country's economic growth, accounting for roughly 1/4 of GDP. However, a combination of factors has brought developers to their knees. China's economic headwinds, primarily due to the country's strict zero-COVID policy, which has shut down entire cities, and the government effort to rein in the real estate industry's soaring debt. That slow-motion crisis has several causes. First, to some extent, it was planned. The government expressly desired to cool down the raging real estate market. Apartment buildings sprang up all over China for years as people moved from the countryside to cities, and developers had easy access to credit. However, it soon became clear that real estate investors, rather than actual home buyers, were driving up demand in a speculative frenzy that left vast swaths of apartments empty. Property prices skyrocketed, making homeownership increasingly unattainable for China's middle class. At the same time, another issue was brewing. The developers who benefited from the high prices amassed a mountain of debt to continue building at breakneck speed. In recent years, government officials have begun to see the risky underbelly of that property-fueled economic growth model. President Xi Jinping has repeatedly emphasized that houses are built to be inhabited, not for speculation. The Chinese government decided to intervene in August to deflate the housing bubble before it burst. The Housing Ministry and the People's Bank of China announced a 3 red lines policy, outlining 3 benchmarks for determining the number of debt developers had taken on. If regulators discovered that a developer has exceeded benchmarks, the developer's ability to borrow would be restricted. Many of China's largest developers had exceeded the thresholds, and they all had to begin rebalancing their lopsided balance sheets. As a result, these companies could not complete the apartments they had promised to people all over the country. Could this drive a global economic crash? China's property woes pose a significant risk to the country's economy, which is already stressed due to Beijing's harsh zero-COVID policies and slowing global growth. According to some estimates, real estate accounts for 30% of GDP, roughly twice the equivalent share in the United States. While some analysts believe the market has bottomed out, the sector's problems are expected to last for some time. S&P Global Ratings estimated in July that property prices would fall 30% this year, a worse drop than during the 2008 financial crisis. The global economy is not at high risk of the type of financial crisis sparked by the collapse of Lehman Brothers in the United States, because Chinese property developers hold relatively small amounts of overseas debt. However, given the size of China's economy, which accounts for nearly 1/5 of global GDP, a significant slowdown could still impact global growth. According to the World Economic Forum, every percentage point decline in China's GDP results in a 0.3% decrease in global GDP. According to the United States Federal Reserve study, an 8.5% drop in China's GDP would result in a 3.25% drop in advanced economies and a nearly 6% drop in emerging economies. China's economy is unlikely to experience such a severe economic meltdown. However, analysts believe it is on track for a prolonged slump that will drag on global growth in the coming years. What is China doing about the crisis? Despite its determination to reduce the economy's reliance on the sector, Beijing has signaled that supporting the property market is an important task. Officials said that there was a need to stabilize the real estate market at a meeting of China's top decision-making body in July, emphasizing that local governments should take responsibility for ensuring pre-sold homes are completed. Caixin, a Chinese news outlet, reported earlier this month that Beijing was planning to issue 200 billion yuan or $29.3 billion loans to finish unfinished housing projects. Beijing has also taken measures to stimulate the economy more broadly, such as lowering interest rates and expanding stimulus, such as the announcement last week of 300 billion yuan or $44 billion in new credit through its state-run policy banks. We anticipate that additional funding will be arranged to support the completion of unfinished houses, said Wu, an economist at Oxford Economics, in a note. In fact, the statement from the Politburo meeting in July emphasizes the need to stabilize the property market and ensure the delivery of houses. These efforts, we believe, are unlikely to come directly from the central government. Instead, authorities will most likely ask local governments, banks, and property developers to work together to complete unfinished housing projects. Chinese efforts to support the market may be limited, with Beijing widely expected to stick to its 3 red lines and Chinese President Xi Jinping's mantra that houses are for the living, not speculation. According to Will Dao, China's policymakers are now faced with the choice of continuing with their real estate crackdown or changing course for the sake of growth. To embark on a bailout now would be to roll back and retreat on those gains, he said. It will also be politically inconvenient because it would appear to be a reversal or admission of error. As a result, I believe the policy has been relatively lackluster. We haven't seen the housing bailout that many investors had hoped for. What comes next? Chinese government officials are working hard to keep the boycotts at bay and keep the property market from destabilizing further. It's a delicate balancing act. The government wanted to reduce the sector's debt, but it's now being forced to intervene to prevent the crisis from spreading to other parts of the economy. So far, authorities have largely allowed boycotters to pause payments without consequences. And the government isn't abandoning developers entirely. Instead, central government officials are attempting to expedite project completion, initially appointing local governments to oversee the work. According to the Chinese financial outlet Caixin, local state-owned companies may even be tasked with purchasing stalled developments and completing them on their own. However, local governments alone cannot solve the problem, partly because they are already deeply in debt due to implementing the costly zero-COVID policy. The central government appears to recognize this. According to Bloomberg, the central bank will provide developers nearly $30 billion in special loans to help them complete the delayed projects. Even this is likely to be insufficient. Given how much revenue the sector is currently losing, Wright believes the $30 billion doesn't seem large enough to help developers significantly at all. One thing is certain, according to Wallace, given the political sensitivity, the mortgage boycotters will not bear the full cost. It's an enticing population, he said. The family that has not saved up to buy something that they will never be able to buy because of some billionaire developer, that's a political fight that they will always win. And I believe that is a very dangerous potential problem that the government will not or cannot leave alone. Meanwhile, if the government eventually convinces developers to deliver the majority of the apartments to the boycotters, the country's property sector remains in distress. According to the New York Times, sales at China's top 100 property developers fell by half in the year's first 6 months. Home prices have also fallen, and more developers are expected to go bankrupt this year. In some ways, this was the government's goal, but the real estate sector has fallen too quickly as a result of zero COVID. Where will China be after this downward spiral? First, it is likely to continue to reign in the property sector to a large extent, even if it comes at an economic cost. However, Beijing risks intervening too little and allowing the economy to fall even further. As a result, the real estate crisis may eventually erupt into a larger financial crisis. I'd be much more concerned in the second half of the year and early 2023 that we haven't seen the impact of falling property sales on the financial sector yet. Wright said, "It's extremely difficult to predict where that will appear." What do you think about the economic crisis in China? Let us know your views in the comments below.